Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something really interesting. Potential future air power dynamics.
That's right.
We've got this document basically outlining some hypothetical conflict scenarios. Think Indian Air Force versus Pakistan, looking out towards the 2030s.
Yeah, and it's important to stress this isn't about crystal ball gazing, is it?
Not at all. It's more about understanding the strategic thinking, the planning that goes into defense preparedness.
Exactly. It's the what-if thinking that drives capability development and doctrine.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to pull out the key insights. How might aerial warfare evolve? What are the potential responses the IAF is considering? It's a glimpse into future challenges, future tech.
And what's valuable isn't just the specific scenarios, but the underlying trends they point to, the evolving threats, the necessary adaptations. That's the real takeaway.
Okay, let's jump right in. First scenario, a multi-layered drone swarm attack aimed at critical Indian air bases.
Yeah.
We're talking potentially hundreds, maybe thousands of drones hitting all at once.
It's a saturation tactic, really, designed to just overwhelm everything.
So the potential impact: overwhelming radar, air defenses, maybe blocking runways, hitting hangars.
Could be chaos. You could effectively ground a significant part of the Air Force, at least temporarily. It's about volume. Traditional defenses aren't really built for that scale of simultaneous small targets.
Right. So how does the IAF plan to counter something like that? The document talks about AI-enabled anti-drone systems.
Yes, that's key. Layered defenses, too. Jamming directed energy weapons.
When we say AI here, what's the specific advantage over, say, just faster computers? Is it about recognition, prioritization?
It's all of that. AI can process sensor data incredibly fast, distinguish between, say, a bird and a hostile drone, track hundreds of targets, prioritize the immediate threats, and even coordinate different weapon systems, jamming for some, lasers for others, far beyond what human operators could manage in that kind of swarm scenario.
Okay, so it's the brain managing the shield.
In a way, yes. And the layers are crucial. Jamming might disrupt control for many, but directed energy gives you that hard kill capability for those that get through or are autonomous.
The document also mentions specific detection grids. High-frequency sensors, battlefield AI. Sounds like a dedicated early warning net just for drones.
Precisely. Early detection is everything against swarms. High-frequency radar is generally better for smaller, slower targets than traditional air surveillance radar.
Right, the ones looking for fast jets might miss these.
Exactly. And the AI piece ties all those sensor inputs together, filters out the noise, and gives you a clear operational picture of the drone threat.
And then there's the more foundational stuff. Hardening critical infrastructure, building underground hangars.
Yeah.
Seems like a mix of high-tech and just solid protection.
It has to be. You need resilience. Technology can be countered, bypassed. Hardened shelters, dispersed facilities, they ensure that even if the outer defenses are breached, your core assets, your aircraft, your command centers can survive and operate.
That makes sense. Physical security is still vital.
Absolutely. This whole scenario, as the document frames it, fits under tactical adaptation to infrastructure resilience. It's that blend. New tech meeting robust foundations.
Okay, let's shift gears. Scenario 2 brings in a geopolitical wrinkle. China covertly supporting Pakistan, maybe with satellite intelligence or even electronic warfare jamming during a border skirmish?
Now that's a significant escalation, even if covert. External support like that can be a real force multiplier.
How specifically could that impact IAF operations? Degraded comms, GPS denial. What does that mean on the ground, or rather, in the air?
It means your smart bombs might not be so smart anymore. Your pilots might struggle with precise navigation, especially in bad weather or complex terrain. Coordination between units becomes much harder if your data links are down or jammed. It introduces friction and uncertainty into every aspect of the operation.
So the IAF response involves things like hybrid inertial navigation systems, INS, on aircraft. Can you break that down a bit? How does that help if GPS is out?
Sure. So an INS uses internal sensors, gyroscopes, accelerometers to track an aircraft's movement from a known starting point. It doesn't rely on external signals like GPS.
So it navigates by dead reckoning, essentially, but very sophisticated dead reckoning.
Exactly. The hybrid part means it works with GPS when available, constantly correcting itself for better accuracy. But if GPS gets jammed, the INS can keep providing a pretty good position estimate, allowing the mission to continue. It's a crucial fallback.
And they're also looking at launching more of their own military satellites, working with ISRO. That sounds like a push for self-reliance.
A major push. Technological sovereignty. especially in space, is critical. Having your own dedicated encrypted military satellites for communication, imagery, navigation, it reduces vulnerability to jamming and reliance on other nations or commercial systems. Partnering with ISRO makes perfect sense, leveraging their huge expertise.
It reduces the impact of that potential Chinese interference.
That's the goal. This scenario clearly highlights the importance of what the document calls strategic intelligence and technological sovereignty, building indigenous capability and securing your information flow.
Right. Let's move into the cyber domain now. Scenario 3. Pakistan initiates cyber warfare, targeting the IAF's C4I systems. This is during the buildup before a potential conflict.
Hitting the nervous system before the shooting starts. That's a classic cyber warfare approach.
Can you quickly explain C4I for listeners?
Yeah.
Command, control, communications, computers, and intelligence.
That's it. It's the entire digital infrastructure that connects commanders, sensors, platforms, intelligence analysts, logistics, everything. It allows for coordinated action.
So hitting that, what are the potential consequences? Data leaks, false orders.
All of the above, potentially. You could have compromised flight plans, delayed strike orders because the network is down, false air raid warnings causing chaos, intelligence databases being wiped or stolen. It could seriously degrade the IAF's ability to respond effectively when or if kinetic conflict begins.
Okay, that sounds deeply destabilizing. So the IAF's response includes setting up a dedicated cyber UW warfare wing. And they mention red teaming. What's that?
Red teaming is essentially ethical hacking. You have a team constantly trying to break into your own systems, thinking like an adversary, finding the weak spots before the real enemy does. It's a crucial part of proactive cyber defense.
So you're constantly testing your own defenses.
Exactly. And they also mention AI-driven anomaly detection and zero trust protocols.
Zero trust. What does that mean in practice?
It basically means don't trust anyone or anything on your network by default. Even if a user or device is already inside, it needs to constantly verify its authorization to access specific resources. No more implicit trust just because you're logged in. AI helps here too, spotting unusual behavior patterns that might signal a compromised account or intrusion.
It sounds like a much more rigorous security posture.
It has to be. The document links this to operational integrity and cyber resilience. You need robust, multi-layered cyber defenses baked into your operations from the start.
Let's shift back to a more kinetic but still complex scenario. Scenario 4. A Pakistani fighter strays into Indian airspace, it gets shot down, and things escalate rapidly towards full-scale conflict.
Yeah, these accidental encounters or border violations are incredibly dangerous flashpoints. Miscalculation is a huge risk.
The potential for rapid, almost uncontrollable escalation feels very high.
Absolutely. Emotions run high, national pride is involved, and the fog of war can lead to bad decisions. Managing the immediate aftermath is critical to prevent things spiraling.
So the IAF strategy emphasizes clear rules of engagement, ROE, and a rapid but controlled chain of command through Air HQ. Why is that structure so vital?
Clear ROEs provide pre-approved guidelines for pilots and commanders in tense, ambiguous situations. It helps ensure responses are measured, proportionate, and authorized, rather than reflexive or based on individual judgment alone. A rapid chain of command means decisions can be made quickly, but they are made at the appropriate level, preventing unintended escalation from, say, a local commander's decision.
So it provides structure in chaos.
Precisely. And they also plan to use advanced AEW&C aircraft airborne early warning and control to record these incidents for verification.
Having that objective record must be crucial, especially with global media and diplomacy involved.
Indispensable. In a he said, she said situation, having verifiable radar tracks, communications intercepts, maybe even video, from a platform like an AEW&C can provide irrefutable proof of what actually happened, who crossed the border, who fired first. It's vital for managing the narrative, de-escalating, and dealing with international pressure.
Right, it backs up your diplomatic efforts.
Exactly. This connects directly to escalation management and global diplomacy in the Matrix. It's about having the tools, both military and informational, to manage crises.
Okay, 5th scenario. This one feels particularly relevant today. Pakistan using commercial, off-the-shelf drones, maybe modified with explosives, to hit civilian airports or logistics hubs.
A very asymmetric threat, low cost, easy to acquire, potentially high impact in terms of disruption, and frankly, terror.
It circumvents traditional military defenses in a way. What are the implications? Halting air traffic, stretching security resources.
All of that. It forces the military and security agencies to divert resources to protect civilian sites, creates public fear, disrupts the economy. It's a way to inflict pain without a direct military confrontation.
So the IAF's response involves coordinating really closely with civilian agencies, BCAS, NSG deploying counter-drone systems, CUAS at civilian airports.
It has to be a multi-agency effort. The IAF can provide technical expertise and perhaps some systems, but BCAS, Bureau of Civil Aviation Security, and NSG, National Security Guard, have the mandate and presence at civilian facilities. It requires seamless coordination.
They also mentioned potentially converting some IAF units into internal homeland air defense teams, kind of rapid reaction forces.
That shows flexibility, recognizing that the threat might not always come from across the border, but could emerge internally or target civilian areas, requiring a different kind of rapid response capability.
And even using private drone intelligence networks, like startups doing urban drone mapping.
That's interesting, isn't it? Leveraging the innovation in the private sector. Startups might have sophisticated ways to track drone activity in urban areas that traditional military systems don't. It shows an openness to unconventional solutions.
Yeah, a real whole-of-nation approach almost.
Which fits perfectly under homeland defense and civil aviation security. It's about protecting the homeland using all available resources, public and private.
All right, scenario 6. Simultaneous standoff missile strikes. Multiple Indian air bases hit at roughly the same time by missiles launched from a distance.
This is a more conventional but still very challenging threat, aimed at decapitation or severely disrupting air operations right at the outset.
The potential impact seems clear, disrupting command, hitting runways and fuel depots, destroying aircraft on the ground, basically degrading the ability to launch sorties.
Exactly. It aims to cripple the IAF's ability to generate air power quickly, affecting everything from air defense to strike missions.
So the response strategy includes pre-positioning mobile SAM systems, surface-to-air missiles, and also using decoy emitters.
Right. Mobility is key for SAMs. You can't protect every possible target all the time, but mobile systems can be deployed to cover the most critical assets or likely attack vectors. Decoys are crucial too, making the enemy waste expensive missiles on fake targets.
Deception playing a big role.
Always does in warfare. And they also talk about a base-in-a-box concept. FARP's forward air refueling points that can be deployed quickly.
So if a main base is hit, you can set up shop somewhere else relatively fast.
That's the idea. Dispersal and resilience. Having the ability to operate from austere or alternative locations, coupled with maintaining reserve squadrons at hardened, geographically dispersed bases, places like Leh, Thanjavur, Kalikunda are mentioned.
It's about not having all your eggs in one basket.
Precisely. It ensures operational continuity. This whole concept aligns with strategic flexibility and command resilience, being able to adapt, disperse, and continue the fight even after taking hits.
Okay, scenario 7. This one's about electronic warfare again, but more specific. An IAF Rafale squadron on a surgical strike mission over Poke suddenly faces intense jamming.
A very specific tactical challenge. The Rafale is advanced, but sophisticated jamming could potentially blind its radar, disrupt its data links with other aircraft or controllers, maybe even affect its navigation or self-protection systems.
So, loss of situational awareness, confusion, making the aircraft vulnerable.
Potentially, yes, especially during a critical phase of a mission like ingress or weapon release. It can force pilots to abort or put them at much higher risk.
The IAF response mention includes ECCM upgrades for the Rafales, electronic countermeasures.
Right. It's that constant EW arms race. As jammers get better, your systems need upgrades to resist or overcome the jamming signals. Better filters, frequency hopping, more powerful transmitters.
A continuous tech battle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's not just tech. They also plan to train pilots on offline mission completion, using SOPs, standard operating procedures, and dead reckoning if their advanced systems are degraded.
So falling back on fundamental piloting skills.
Essential skills. And also using decoy UAVs to go in first and try to stimulate or draw out the enemy jammers so you know where they are or can target them.
Clever. Using drones to clear the path electronically.
It's about tactical adaptation. This scenario falls under combat adaptation and tactical precision, refining tactics and ensuring pilots can handle degraded environments alongside the tech upgrades.
Okay, final scenario number 8. Pakistan gets a surprise delivery of advanced assets mid-conflict. Maybe Turkish Bayraktar TB2s or Akinci drones, maybe Korean drones, or even, hypothetically, Chinese J-20 stealth fighters.
That's the unknown factor almost. A sudden shift in the adversary's capabilities right when you're already engaged.
What's the main danger there? Capability asymmetry.
Exactly. Suddenly they might have a long-endurance ISR drone you weren't expecting, giving them better intelligence, or a stealth aircraft that can penetrate your air defenses more easily. It forces you to adapt your strategy on the fly, potentially facing a threat you haven't specifically trained or equipped for.
So the IAF's plan response involves activating dormant acquisition protocols, getting more LCA Tejas fighters or combat UAVs quickly.
It suggests having contingency plans to rapidly accelerate production or procurement if a sudden capability gap emerges. Flexibility in the acquisition process.
And fast-tracking interoperability with allies like France or Israel, perhaps?
Leveraging those strategic partnerships. If an ally operates a system that can counter the new threat, or if they can share intelligence or tactics rapidly, that's a huge advantage. Tactical interoperability becomes crucial.
And deploying their own advanced assets, like the Nitra ADW&C, to keep a close eye on these new threats.
Constant surveillance. You need to understand the new asset, how it operates, its weaknesses as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
AEW&C and other ISR platforms would be vital for that deep look. This all ties into strategic alliances and acquisition strategy, relying on partnerships and agile procurement when surprises happen.
Wow. So, looking back across all 8 of these scenarios, from drone swarms to cyber attacks, covert support, surprise deliveries, it's a really diverse threat landscape they're planning for.
It really is, and the responses are just as diverse. AI, hardening, new tactics, indigenous tech, alliances, cyber wings.
It definitely shows that the strategic thinking within the IAF is, well, comprehensive. They're not just focused on traditional air combat, they're anticipating challenges across multiple domains.
Absolutely. This document, even being hypothetical scenarios, gives us a pretty clear window into that proactive planning. It emphasizes continuous adaptation, technological development, and a multi-layered approach to defense.
It's a fascinating look at how defense planning tries to stay ahead of the curve.
Indeed. Constant evolution is the name of the game.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, our listeners. We've walked through these potential future conflicts, these planned IAF strategies, but what else is out there? What other unexpected tech breakthroughs or maybe geopolitical shifts could radically reshape air power in the next decade? Things maybe not even covered here.
Yeah, and thinking beyond just the India-Pakistan context, what are the wider implications? If these kinds of advanced multi-domain conflicts become more common, what does that mean for regional stability, for global security?
Some really significant questions to think about as we wrap up this deep dive.